Hello. I haven't made a video in quite a while actually. What are we doing today? I wish I knew. Actually, I'm trying to make yet another illustration for minuit moins 5, 5 minutes to midnight. I wrote that back in December. It's SCP fiction, and I really like how it turned out. And as a result, the same thing happened with this as with Miroir Fumant, Smoking Mirror, the year prior, meaning I'm drawing a lot of things based on my own writing. And even if it's linked to SCP, and there's some people following me who are into SCP stuff, most people aren't. Not saying everyone has rejected this and me drawing things about it. Far from it. I was actually very surprised by the amount of people who were interested in this thing. But you know that feeling where you're talking about something you really like, and you know at some point you realize the person who you're talking to is just waiting for the conversation to change subjects. And the thing is, since I'm on the spectrum, I tend to realize that way too late when I do, because sometimes I just don't. And that's very awkward. No, yeah, imagine that, but for an entire blog. That's basically me for the past year or so. So what I'm drawing today, what I'm trying to sketch today, more exactly, is a concert from an imaginary band called Midnight Blossom, which is from that thing I wrote. Ooh, that's a weird angle for an arm. Should be like this, I think. Yeah, because the torso is right there. And since I'm doing everything backwards, as you can see, I'm constructing the skeleton after placing some parts of the character already, but yeah. Yeah, so that's an imaginary band from the story. It's called Midnight Blossom. It's a scene band because basically the entire story happens in emo slash scene subculture. I'm gonna try to quickly sum up what happened, even though it's explained on the page of the thing itself, which I've entirely translated, by the way. I wasn't able to find a beta reader because the thing is very long, and the only person who wanted to beta read it for me I was completely okay with paying, but I couldn't pay the amount they were asking for. It was a lot of money, so I ended up posting it without a beta reader because I couldn't. The amount they asked for was roughly a third of my monthly income, so I really couldn't afford that, really. Not even sure what kind of shoes this guy would be wearing. Platforms? I have no idea. I've already drawn that singer once, and he was wearing some kind of very stupid Beetlejuice-like suit with stripes. I'm gonna do the stripes later. What I actually want to draw are the main characters, and I want them somewhere in the crowd. In my mind, when I wrote the scene, character was here, about here. Astro was there. Cyril was there. And Leila was there. This has nothing to do with anything, but it's very hot today, and I had to open the blinds to be able to film, and I'm starting to regret that decision a bit. What's the story about? I assume you already know what the SCP Foundation is, but I'm just going to say it very quickly. It's the thing itself is a writing project. It's kind of old at this point, and it's about how there's this top secret foundation trying to defend the world against anomalies and horrible stuff, dangerous things that break the laws of physics and stuff, and a bit like the X-Files, but with like 100 times the budget, if that makes sense. Some organizations don't like this. There's of course there's like the equivalent of anarchist groups. There's the equivalent of terrorism for the anomalous world. There's people who are just into magic in general. There's religions that are based on dangerous anomalous stuff, etc., etc. And one of the groups of interest is religion, is some sort of space cult called the Fifth Church, and some sort of meme transmitted through space and time around the number 5. And basically imagine if there were Lovecraftian and unknowable entities broadcasting that across space and time and trying to find cultists and adepts and stuff through space and time just based on that. And sometimes on Earth people start new cults based on these kinds of frequencies they can perceive. And the Fifth Church always has 5 branches at the same time, but they can be anything. It can range from a huge Scientology style cult to very, very small stuff like a group of hippie friends in a van trying to go to another planet in a flying van. That's an SCP, by the way, and if that sounds funny, it's actually heart-wrenching. These branches can range from mildly inconvenient for the Foundation to huge threats, depending on what they do and how many people there are in them. So that's the basics. And last year, back when I wrote Miroir Fumant, during that contest I already talked about, which was where you had to pick an aesthetic and topic, and I picked decadentism and nobody. A friend picked a really, really funny combo, which was Fifth Church and a scene aesthetic. and he noped out of it like in a couple of days. Like, nah, I'm gonna re-roll and write something else, and he ended up writing nothing, which was a shame. But at first I was like, that's you, that's gold. You drew gold on that roll, and you should really try to write it. And he was like, no way, I'm not writing this shit. And I kept thinking about it. I was like, there's something there. I think it's possible to write something, and not necessarily in a parodic way. I think there's serious potential behind this. And now is a good time to mention I was way too old to ever be a scene kid, but I was very much an emo kid back in high school and even university. And that would be around from about 2003 to about 2008, I think. And the scene blew up right after that. So I'm not saying I was too old for it. Some people my age were into it, but I by the point it really blew up, I was already I was near the end of my studies and nearly working, and so I wasn't around a lot of people either my age or younger than me anymore. So I wasn't really in contact with it. But I get it, you know, it's kind of a similar vibe to the whole emo thing, just a few years later. I never liked the scene kid aesthetic. I thought it was horrible. But at the same time, I don't know if you're watching this, if you ever lived in an apartment building. I've exclusively lived in apartment buildings my entire life, so I don't know if you ever had someone very annoying on the same floor as your apartment, but who's at the same time too endearing to get angry at. You're very annoyed because the guy is playing his music too loud and it's not even the kind of music you enjoy, but at the same time, if cops are around, you're not going to tell them that it was him who was playing the music too loud. I don't know if you get what I mean by that. Like someone who's annoying to you personally, but you still want to protect them somehow, because yeah, that's how I felt about Scene Kids in general, and the whole scene stuff. I thought it was bad, but I also felt like people were thinking the same thing just a few years before that about stuff I liked. And so I was like, no, must protect at all costs, even if the people were extremely annoying. I felt some sort of kinship, if that makes sense. Some of the music, not all obviously, but some of the music I liked. The whole metalcore thing. And that's also why I wanted to write that. The singer was too small compared to the characters, the background, so I'm just going to draw him again, but bigger. Some of the most recent scene adjacent things inspired me for the aesthetic of this thing I wrote. And not always the most dignified ones, like the whole blue and pink thing was mostly due to the music video Drugs by Falling in Reverse. I always had terrible taste in music, so it shouldn't even be surprising to you. Anyway, the series itself, it's a group of friends who accidentally get embroiled in a branch of the Fifth Church. That branch appeared in the emo/scene fandoms in Paris. The Fifth Church spawns some kind of death cult, considering the number of people who have suicidal tendencies, who listen to this kind of self-destructive music. It turns out really badly for everyone involved. So yeah, the entire story is about self-destruction, all its various aspects, not just the most literal ones. And as you can guess, it got a bit too personal at times. But I still really liked writing it. Also, I was really adamant about it ending on a positive note, with hope. Spoiler, none of the 5 main characters actually die. And that was very important to me. I mean, what's the point if you try to write something about overcoming these feelings and stuff, and then you kill the character? That would be very nihilistic, and I really hate nihilism for the sake of it. There's a whole segment about nihilism in this story too, because I can't resist ranting about people who think like that. The thing is, I used to be very nihilistic too. I just think it's not a good way to live your life. Positive nihilism only, lads. If nothing matters, why aren't we nice to each other and try to have a good life while we're here? That's the spirit, I guess. My arm kind of hurts because I did a blood test this morning. It wasn't very pleasant, as you can probably guess, considering that's a phobia of mine. I'm not sure I like what I did with his hand there. This happens in chapter 2. They are at a concert of the imaginary band Midnight Blossom, back when the band is still kind of small, so it's in a very small venue and not in like a giant arena or stadium or anything. And there's one character who's not there at that point. The character who's arguably the main character, because that's the one we're following, that's the point of view character, is Ada. Ada is very loosely based on a friend I had in high school. Ada is basically this kind of person who really wants to be a punk, who can't commit because she cares too much about too many things. The whole nothing matters spirit doesn't work with her. She tries really hard, but she cares deeply about way too many things. The aspect of self-destruction explored with her is anger. You're going to say, wait a minute, isn't that just destructive, period? But the kicker is she's never really violent against other people. Mostly she breaks stuff that either belong to her or that are just around her when she's angry and can deal with stuff. And she ends up hurting herself by accident in the process. In the first chapter, she breaks her wrist by smashing a chair against a wall. And I had to ask some friends how that feels to be able to describe it, because I've never broken a single bone in my body in my entire life so far. And they were like, it hurts, but it's not like you'd expect, and bones breaking feels like feeling a branch snapping, so I put that in the text. Otherwise I would have no idea how to describe it. Her best friend is Cyril. Cyril is the only cliché scene kid in the entire story. In this chapter he has a complete look with the bracelets and the colored hair and the terrible clothes and stuff. He's the most obviously self-destructive because he's the suicidal one. He's got issues and he never really gets over them before the last chapter. It's complicated, his family sucks, no support at all. He's got terrible taste in basically everything, and that's the only thing he doesn't dislike about himself. I can only find this type of self-loathing by looking at myself when I was in high school, basically, so that's the only character who's loosely based on someone I used to be. Ada seems to be quite popular with the readers I had. Cyril is more... people are more split about him. They are arguably the two main characters because they are the one we spend the most time with. Then there's Layla. Layla is a bit of a weird case with my readers because most people are puzzled by her, and like there's one or two of them who absolutely adored her. She's not based on one person in particular I knew, but several actually. The thing with Layla is she's a bit of a control freak, but that also extends to her own image to a point where it becomes really dangerous because she has this very, very precise idea of what she should look like, and it's not at all realistic as she becomes embroiled in the whole cult thing. The more it goes, the less human what she envisioned for herself is, and things get very, very ugly very quickly. Astro is the very tall one. What I wanted to explore with this guy was people sabotaging their relationships because they believe they're not good enough for anything or anyone, not even for friends. And he's a bit of a polarizing character too. Some people are like, why is that guy like this? It should be so easy not to do that and just have friends and be normal about it. And a few other people who either straight up have avoidant personality disorder or some weaker version of that, or are just socially awkward, sent me messages going, yeah, no, that hit way too close to home. It was kind of a challenge for me to write exactly 0 trans characters among all the main characters for once, because that's most relatable for me. However, I don't even know when I decided that, but Astro is intersex, so that has next to no impact on the story, but that was interesting to research. As you can guess, that doesn't help him feeling better, and especially in his romantic relationships, it's very complicated for him. I drew most of the public off camera because I thought it would be a bit tedious. Anyway, yeah, the characters. Call it self-hatred if you want, but I'd like to see it more as a retroactive self-acceptance thing, but it felt right to have by far the cringiest character out of all of them being mostly based on me. It just felt right. I mean, not me right now, but me as a teenager. I was kind of surprised because quite a few readers actually liked him and didn't want bad stuff to happen to him, so that was kind of healing in a way. I think we're always judging our past selves harsher than other people actually judge them. As I explained, I mostly sat out the entire MySpace era, which is a shame. I was on DeviantArt. After I started working, I was on Tumblr too, but the entire MySpace stuff flew past me. I'm pretty sure I would have been part of that crowd, 100%, if I had the resources at the time. You know, this particular idiot named Cyril is the kind of guy with a MySpace page full of drawings and who sends stuff like roar means I love you in dinosaur to his crush and stuff. Cyril is very gay, by the way. I tried not to write any trans character for once, but I can't avoid writing queer characters. That's just impossible for me. Mind you, there's not a chapter, but an interlude, which is the interludes aren't like the chapters. They're on other formats. Like there's one that's a forum, a fake forum. That there's one that which is a fake blog. And there's one that's entirely in texts between two people, and the two people are Cyril and Astro, because at some point they're together. I wanted to put something both cute and very, very cringy at some point about how this guy tried to hit on that guy, and I was like, okay, I'm trying to remember a very, very cringy romantic song I actually liked as a teenager, like not one that you'd expect someone from this era to send to a crush, because that would be too obvious. And I went with something completely left field. There's a singer in France called Laurent Voulzy. There's this whole fail-like vibe to everything he does. Sometimes it's really cool, sometimes it's really cringy. There's no in between, really. And I was really vibing with a specific song as a teenager. It's a romantic pop song that takes itself very seriously, but it's straight up written like emo poetry. And I thought it would be really funny and really fitting too if that guy sent the entire lyrics of that song to that guy by texts, and, and the other guy is like, what the fuck is happening? One thing I really regret about the design of all of these characters, not really regret, but I should have thought a bit more before I did that, was giving Astro a combat vest full of patches. I love patches. My own combat vest is covered in them. I was like, one character needs one of them. Let's say the pastel punk guy, Astro, has one. And yeah, in theory, that was a cool idea. In practice, that means every time I draw the guy, I have to draw the vest with all the patches on it. And it's kind of a pain. I won't be able to draw it here, but on one of his front pockets, there's a patch saying, read a fucking book. Which I thought was funny for a guy from the Serpent's Hand. Oh, I haven't explained that yet. That character is part of a group of interests, an enemy of the Foundation, called the Serpent's Hand. They think what the Foundation does with anomalies is very medieval way of dealing with stuff, like lock up things you don't get and call it a day. And they think the Foundation is actively harming humanity's progress by locking away things that could make it better. And also they don't like at all how the Foundation treats sentient anomalies, and they want them to be treated like people. So he's part of that group loosely, because he's not very active in the group, but he's still part of it. And I thought it would be ironic if he had this kind of edgy patches people like to wear with snakes and stuff, and the guy is actually a member of the Serpent's Hand. I thought that would be really funny. There's a ton of dumb jokes based on pop culture stuff in this story. Like there's at some point same character is wearing a pierced the veil shirt. I thought it would be funny because the Foundation calls the illusion of reality they are trying to maintain the veil. It's a small venue, so there's always stuff stuck sideways in these places on the posters. Let's start the shadows. Last month I was at the My Chemical Romance concert in Paris. It was excellent. I felt really emotional to still be there, to see that, and they were all looking like they were having fun, and they confirmed that in interviews later, and also on stage at a different concert. They just don't give a fuck anymore, and it was really, really fun to see, and yeah, that was a really good time. I saw a lot of people with really, really cool vests and patches there, and great looks too. There was a guy with a bright red mohawk with red gel painting some sort of fake decapitation. I blurred the guy's eyes and I shared the pic on some Discords, and on one of them someone said, "Okay, that's the most French way of being a goth that I ever saw in my life." I was like, hell yeah. Let's cut some heads. Oh god. And there was a guy with a really, really cool vest with a huge patch saying ni Dieu ni maître on the back. No God, no masters. And on the front, in case we didn't agree with the message on the back, there was another patch saying crève, go die. And I was like, hell yeah. That was such a good evening. At some point I was a bit became a bit rough for me because I was a bit tired. I was wearing a binder. I had been pushed during a pogo in the pit and hit in the ribs, and I couldn't breathe for a while, so I had to move. But before that, people around me were really nice when we talked together before it all started, and the people right in front of me were speaking in Portuguese. I was like, "You're from Portugal?" And the girl was like, "Yeah," and I was like, "But you came from Portugal?" And she was like, "Yeah, yeah, we came just to see My Chemical Romance in Paris." And I was like, "Just for that?" "Yeah, just for that." That was the closest to home they'd go, so we went to Paris to see them, and I was like, whoa. There was a guy with a t-shirt, a custom t-shirt. The guy was extremely tall, and I mean it. I think he was more than 2 meters tall, and he had a t-shirt that said, "I'm really sorry," on the back. So many people dressed as killjoys. That was really heartwarming to see. I'm in the public. A lot of people either just having a mask or having the entire Killjoy garb, like the everything, and it was very impressive and also very heartwarming because I love Danger Days and a lot of people hate Danger Days. So yeah, that was really cool. I don't regret it at all. I was so scared I'd be disappointed, but no, everything was perfect. In case it takes me 2 months to edit and post this video, we're still in the middle of a heat wave here, which means I have to wait for the sun to go down a bit before I start to film, because I have to open the blinds for that, and the room gets unbearably hot if I do that. Some basic colors, as I like to call them. And as usual, I forgot a hand or two. When there's so many people, you're bound to forget a hand or something at some point, somewhere. Something I had fun with while writing the story was color coding the characters. Cyril's color is green, so I thought giving him horrible green hair during the peak of the scene would be fun. Just be glad I didn't give him raccoon highlights. Ada is coded red. I was like, she's the angry one. Her problem is anger, so that's fitting. Layla's pink. Even when she's part of the horrible cult and stuff, and with the smoke and everything, her smoke is pink. You can't guess it based on the patches and stuff, but Astro's color is yellow. Also, he's wearing some kind of tutu skirt under all that, so you can see that either. Pastel punks are people I really admire. The whole refusal to reject girly things and still be punk is very commendable, I think. Especially when it's stuff that guys wear. I think it's really, really cool. The character who is in there is called Theo. I mentioned him once or twice already. And his color is blue. This is only important near the end, where the characters are literally color-coded. Their words take the color they are attributed throughout the story. There's more sneaky things too. All of them have some sort of animal linked to them. It's almost never mentioned, but Ada's metaphorical animal is a bear. I think it's only mentioned once in the first chapter in an indirect way, because Cyril's metaphorical animal is the crow, because of course it is. And at some point, while she's talking to him, Ada is looking at a poster on her wall. It's an Indochine poster of the album Alice et June. In the background, there's a teddy bear holding a wounded crow. For those who don't know, Indochine is a huge French band from the 80s. They're still around. They're still making music. And what the incredible thing about them is they started as a new wave band, and they more or less kept doing the same thing over the years, to the point where people were making, and are still making, jokes about how they've always sounded more or less the same. At some point in the 90s, they went really, really out of fashion. Nobody wanted to listen to them anymore, and they kept doing whatever they were doing. And somehow in the early 2000s, there was a whole new wave of young people, myself included, because I was like 14 or 15 at that point, checked what they were doing, and they were like, you know, that's actually very cool. And I insist, what they were doing was nearly identical to what they were doing in the beginning, but somehow the entire zeitgeist looped on itself, and what was cliché and horribly passé 5 years before had become relevant again somehow during the very first emo wave, and all of a sudden Indochine was the fave band of young people in France all over again. That was really, really strange to see, and that was really cool. And you'd see concerts where there were like 3 different generations of fans. That was really cool. I really like them, obviously. I still like them. Saw them in concert a few years ago in the Stade de France. A huge stadium, basically, because they're that popular. They basically attract, in France, the amount of people, the crowd, again, My Chemical Romance concert would attract elsewhere. That's kind of insane. Cool, but kind of insane. And people keep joking about how they are still doing very, very somewhat immature, somewhat edgy stuff. They've never changed that, and people keep joking that the singer Nicolas Sirkis is going through like his 5th or 6th teenage angst crisis. And I don't know, I think that's very funny. I feel like the topic has looped on itself, and I have to talk about the My Chemical Romance concert again. Yeah, again, I was very, very happy to see how much love Danger Days was receiving among fans in the public. People cosplaying the characters and stuff. I really, really like Danger Days. You know how sometimes with a group you really like, you know which album is the best one. Not objectively, but in general, like for you and for most people. But there's also the album you have a special place in your heart for, and that album is Danger Days for me. I just love its vibe. It's first it's set in a post-apocalyptic world, so it's already marking points for that in my book. But also a post-apocalyptic world based on being unapologetically you, and loud and colorful and defiant, and basically how being yourself is the ultimate fuck you to the system. And that sounds very mature, but in the context of the band discography, this happening right after the huge album about the acceptance of death and everything, that I don't know, that I always thought that meant something, and that was very heartwarming for me for some reason. And that's kind of the same reason why I've loved Death Stranding so much. I live for post-apocalyptic stories about helping and loving each other, and just being yourself and trying to help other people, rather than post-apocalyptic stories about just survival and fighting and stuff. I don't know, I think it's a good vibe. The message, not necessarily the music, but the message aged like fine wine, considering it's the big villain of the story is an evil corporation like Google. I don't know, I think that aged nicely, I think. Yeah, these colors don't look like they're making any sense, but I'm going to douse everything in ink later anyway, and it's gonna make sense somehow. Are you ready for chaos? I know I am. That's always my favorite part. Also the part where my brain always tells me, this is horrible, this will never work, and then it dries and you're like, maybe, and then you start adding the lights and it's like, never mind, it's okay. And I've done this like several hundred times since I first found this technique in like 2014, but it doesn't matter. Every time, every single time, brain goes, nope, you fucked up. Should I dry it with a candle? Maybe. See, that's the latest addition to my. That's the latest addition to my very chaotic methods. It's just straight up lighting a candle and drying the drawing above the candle. I'm not going to tell you to try this at home because obviously that's a terrible, terrible idea. But yeah, yep. Been doing this for a couple of months already. It saves a lot of time when you're doing commissions because you don't have to like put the paper away and wait for the stuff to dry for like 20 minutes or so. But on the other hand, I mean, it's still a candle, it's still fire. I'm very scared of fire. I really dislike handling it. I really dislike having it around me. I wouldn't even try this if the candle wasn't enclosed in this kind of glass thing. Just noticed one of the characters I drew in the crowd looked a bit like the YouTuber Crust Bag, if anyone knows who I'm talking about. At some point I had already posted the story and people were starting to read it, and I got like 2 different people sending me a message basically going, I know Midnight Blossom is an imaginary band, but if I want to listen stuff that sounds like them, what should I listen to? I imagine several phases for their career. I imagine the first one on MySpace, like a very, very awful, cringe thing that sounds like Poison Ivy, like Bionic Ghost Kids, if you have any idea what that is. And that song is very funny in a super cringy way. During the time of this concert from chapter 2, exactly when the characters are discovering the band, I'm picturing them being just out of their MySpace phase and starting to find their own sound, but it's still not very good, and they're trying a bunch of different things at the same time. And basically what I was picturing for that era of the sound of the imaginary band was early Enter Shikari. Enter Shikari, who I'm going to see in concert in December, by the way. I've never seen them live. But they're coming to my favorite concert venue in Paris. So if you've never used inks before, first I really recommend it because it's very satisfying. But also recently someone was asking what the point was of painting a first layer with colors and then adding a shit ton of ink on top, and I was like, no, I'm just it just changes the light. And the person said something I absolutely adored because I had never thought of it that way. She instantly went, "Oh, like an Instagram filter." And, it's kind of true. Like you can change the entire mood of something with inks. Okay, I think I'm going to let this dry before it gets even messier. Hello, you've probably noticed there's been some minor changes, like some spots being darker now, because I added some watercolor to fix this. And also some minor work has already been done with watercolor pencils, mostly because I wasn't entirely sure which pencils I was going to use, so I tested stuff on some spots, and now I know what I'm going to use, so let's go. I'm sticking with that blue and pink contrast for this drawing. I don't know, I just think it's neat. Concerts are a weird place, aren't they? I tend to picture them as a social place, but with completely different rules than usual. Like, if you want to talk to the person next to you or in front of you, and that's just normal, that's just how it is, that's not particularly creepy or annoying, or it's just by the end of the evening, you're either going to be friends with everyone around you or hated by everyone around you, because either because you all bonded somehow, or because someone was pushing everyone around to to dance or something, or singing loudly, or both. The cat wants attention. I feel like this is a good point to talk about cringy stuff from when I was a teenager. I talked about Indochine previously. Of course, I talked about My Chemical Romance. My Chemical Romance happened a bit too late to really enrage my mother. In my chronology, let's say, but she was very against basically everything I liked to listen to as a teenager, and that wasn't even on purpose. I wasn't liking stuff specifically to piss her off or anything. But something that really oriented everything I was very passionate about as a teenager was I kept gravitating towards bands with, or singers, but mostly bands, which had some element of gender confusion attached to them in one way or another. It didn't matter. So there was Indochine. One of their biggest songs is a very clumsy song about non-binary people, but it was written in the 80s, so I kind of give them a pass for that, because nobody was singing about that, really. It's not ideal, and it's a bit cliche and stuff, and it's really weird too, but yeah, that's obviously I like that a lot. Also on Paradise, their big comeback album, there were a couple of weird songs about gender too. Weirdly enough, I really didn't like Le Grand Secret, which is the most obvious one on that album. It was slow and dramatic and no fun allowed, basically, and I was way more into the super edgy, super provocative Marilyn song. I will maintain to this day that's one of their best ones. There was Mylène Farmer, but she had an old song called Sans Contrefaçon, and the chorus basically goes, "Without my disguise, I am a boy." Yeah, that's that struck a chord. Now, Linkin Park didn't have anything obvious like that, and they never wrote anything about gender issues as far as I'm aware of anyway. But their songs were vague enough that you could, in some cases, that you could put basically anything you wanted on that. And you know that part in Numb that goes, all I want to do is be more like me and be less like you. Yeah, that was hashtag relatable, as they say. Try to be what you want me to be and stuff. And there was Placebo, and you already know where this is going. In a way, it's very sad to think that at the time there was no trans mask figure I could look up to or admire in the mainstream. But there was something about Brian Molko that always struck a chord with me. And I know his whole shtick was the opposite, like dressing like a girl on stage in early days of the band and stuff. But I don't know, the whole vibe he had. He's very small. His voice is very high pitched for a guy, in a pretty cool way. Obviously, singing about edgy stuff, so obviously I was into that. Very raw emotions and stuff. Not even sure how many eggs that guy accidentally broke, but yeah. At least he never confirmed anything. I'm assuming he's cisgender. He was always a bit vague about that. But I don't want to use labels that anyone never put on themselves first. And my mother hated him, and Placebo in general. And basically everything I was into. Which sucked because that was basically the only moral support I was getting. That was from music. I think there's this whole thing about music and the whole theatrics that come with music in general, where it exists in a space where people are less surprised if you're not completely gender conforming, because there's always that doubt in people's mind, like, no, that's just for the spectacle. That person isn't really like that. It's okay. It's conservative can keep telling themselves that and call it a day. That felt very safe because every time you're like, oh, you're into this or that, the person does this or that, and you like, oh, Brian Molko, but he wears dresses from time to time, doesn't he? Isn't that weird? And if you felt like it was dangerous to go, oh, I'm into that, I think it's really cool that he does that, you could just say, nah, it's okay, it's just for fun. He's an artist. He can do whatever he wants. It's just theatrics. And you could be like, remember Bowie? He was doing the same kind of weird stuff. And they'd be like, oh yeah, of course, I love David Bowie. Side note, I have no idea how all these people from the 70s and 60s who grew up with, and 80s, who grew up with musicians who kept doing weird stuff like that, turned out so conservative for the most part. It's so strange. New gender unlocked. Artist. Musician. That's normal. They're a musician. It's okay. They're allowed to do that. It's less true today, but it might sound really weird if someone younger than me is watching this. Things change mostly overall for the better as far as LGBTQ rights and stuff goes. There's still a long road ahead, but it's still way better than back when I was a teenager. And that might sound weird, the whole building excuse like, oh, but he's an artist, he's allowed to do that thing. That might sound weird now and unnecessary, but I can assure you it was really necessary. Not that long ago. I'm going to add some music in the air because the ink mostly hid the stairs and stuff I had drawn, and there's this space here, and I think it would be interesting if there was some type of music thing drawn there. I'm terrible at explaining stuff. Terrible. The angle isn't very good for me. Sorry, but I'm gonna have to do this. What I'm going to do about the whole music in the air thing is I'm going to listen to a track and try to draw some shapes and stuff based on it, but exaggerating how weird it looks, because this is a No Mouse concert, baby. It's weird. It contains messages from space. I have no idea where I'm going to with this, but yeah, that's going to look like a giant flower. Listening to some Bring Me the Horizon to find a mood for this. Can you tell from the look in our eyes, we're going nowhere? Honestly, I can't wait for that new album. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be horribly disappointed because honestly, after Post-Human Survival Horror, who wouldn't? But I don't know, surprise me, I guess. Who knows, maybe it's going to be really good and I'm gonna eat my words. Have I mentioned, for people who haven't read that thing, that I've basically made an entire fake discography for the band, but also, I think I mentioned that, but also all the fake covers of the albums. It was a lot of work, but it was also very fun to make. There's the whole discography, the titles, some lyrics, some are on the hub or in the story itself. At some point they have a concept album because, of course, they have a concept album. and I was like, okay, what's something I'm really into that would make a great concept album for a super edgy band, but something that hasn't been made into a concept album that I know of yet. And I ended up with Extinction Events, and the album is called Extinction Event. And basically, what happened with Extinction Event is I tried to find all the most metal sounding real paleontological things I could find to make them into song titles, like Lazarus Taxa, Endlings, The Great Dying, stuff like that. In the story, that album is the kind of album that most fans like, critics love, but there's a very specific subset of fans who really, really hates the album and think it doesn't sound like the kind of stuff the band was doing before. So it sucks. I think that's pretty nice. I'm going to put some of the things over the crowd. I think it looks better than like this. It's like tentacles reaching through people's minds somehow. Strange thing here. Otherwise it's going to look empty. And then I think I start the final line art, which I'm not gonna film as usual because I think it's kind of boring to see. I filmed it when I made my paleo art video with Amargasaurus, but I'm still not convinced it's an interesting thing to see. So yeah, I'll finish the line art and stuff off camera. Thank you to anyone who's watched this video and has actually read that story, because that means more than you can imagine to me. If anyone's interested, I'm still going to drop the link in the description. If you're not interested, of course, that's perfectly okay. I will, however, ask you to drop a comment if you have anything to tell me about these videos I'm making, because I either get no comments at all, or very positive ones, or just questions, but never people asking me to do certain types of videos or certain types of things. And I'd really like to hear what people are thinking would be better content for this video and stuff. To basically I'm asking you to help make these videos better if you can. So yeah, please drop a comment if you have something to say. And yeah, I hope you have a great day, and I see you later.